I should have walked away the moment she looked at me like that, like she knew I didn't belong there, but she wasn't going to tell me to leave either. It started simple. A broken sink. My friend's mom's niece, her name was Claire, had called, and I happened to be the only one around who knew how to handle a wrench. I told myself I was doing a favor, that it was nothing more than that. But the second I stepped into her kitchen, something about the air felt different. Too quiet. Too still. She was older than me, mid-40s maybe, but she carried herself in a way that made the space bend toward her. She wore a pale blue shirt, sleeves rolled up, hair pinned loosely like she hadn't meant for anyone to see her this undone. I shouldn't have noticed those things, but I did. I noticed everything. I knelt by the sink, tools scattered across the tile. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. I kept my head down, trying not to think about how close her bare feet were to mine. "You don't have to stay in here," I muttered, tightening a pipe. My voice cracked more than I meant it to. "I know," she said softly. "But I want to see if you actually know what you're doing." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. There was a teasing edge in her tone, but something steadier underneath. Something that made my hands slow down. The house smelled faintly of coffee that had gone cold. The only sound was the faint drip of water from the pipe and the occasional creak of the old wood floor when she shifted her weight. Every small sound seemed louder than it should have been. When I finished, I sat back on my heels and wiped my hands with a rag. She crouched down too, suddenly close, her shoulder brushing mine as she peered under the sink. "Not bad," she murmured. I turned my head, and for a second we were eye to eye. Too close. I should have looked away. Instead, I froze. Her breath caught. I heard it, or maybe imagined it, but the moment stretched longer than it had any right to. "You look like you don't believe me," I said, breaking the silence. Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I didn't say that." We both lingered there, crouched side by side, either moving. My fingers fidgeted with the rag, twisting it tight, while hers rested on her knee, tapping once, twice, like she was keeping time to something unspoken. Finally, she stood, brushing invisible dust from her shirt. "Come on," she said. "You've earned at least a cup of coffee." I followed her into the living room. The light from the window fell across her in a way that made me think of photographs, half shadow, half sun. She set a mug in front of me, then sat opposite, her gaze steady. I tried to sip without staring at her, but it was useless. After a stretch of silence, she leaned forward, elbows on her knees. Her voice dropped low, almost conspiratorial. "This stays between us," she said. I blinked, the words hitting harder than they should have. "What does?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, steady, like she was waiting to see if I'd flinch. And maybe I should have. But instead I held her gaze and said, "It always has." Her hand tightened on the mug. And for the first time that night, she didn't look away. I shouldn't have stayed after the sink was fixed. That was the natural ending. Job done, thanks given, door closed. But when she looked at me across that chipped wooden table, her fingers wrapped around the mug like it was keeping her steady, I couldn't make myself leave. There was something in her eyes, a flicker of, not loneliness exactly, but a quiet that pressed against me. She was the one to break it. "I'm not usually like this," she said, staring into the coffee as though it might finish the sentence for her. "Like what?" I asked. "Letting someone in. Sitting around while a stranger does the work. Talking after." She paused, then added, "I don't usually trust people." That word, trust, landed heavier than I expected. She didn't say it carelessly. "You don't know me," I said gently. Her gaze flicked up, sharp, almost challenging. "Maybe I don't need to." I didn't know what she meant, and I didn't ask. I just sat there, too aware of how close our knees were under the table, how the room still smelled faintly of her shampoo, lavender, and something else I couldn't name. My mind ran faster than I wanted. I noticed how she kept her left hand curled around the mug like it was a shield, while her right hand tapped the table absent-mindedly, restless. I noticed the faint shadow under her eyes, the kind you get from nights of not sleeping. "You look tired," I said before I could stop myself. Her lips pressed together, and for a second I thought I'd crossed some invisible line. Then she sighed, softer than before. "I am. Divorce papers don't exactly make for restful nights." There it was, the thing beneath the quiet. Divorce. A word with edges sharp enough to cut through the air between us. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. Just sat there, watching her eyes flicker toward the window like she regretted saying it out loud. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "You're too young to understand." I wanted to argue. Instead, I leaned back, trying to seem casual even though my chest felt too tight. "Maybe. But I know what it's like to stay up all night replaying things you can't fix." That got her attention. She tilted her head, studying me like she hadn't expected me to push back. For a moment, her expression softened. The silence stretched, and I felt it again, the wrongness of this, the pull of it. I should have stood up, thanked her, left. But the thought of walking out into the cool night and leaving her here, alone with cold coffee and shadows, felt impossible. She set her mug down and leaned forward. The motion was small, but it shifted everything. Her hand reached across the table, brushing against my arm, not a full touch, just enough to leave a trace of warmth. "Stay a little longer," she said, not quite looking at me. My breath caught, words gathering at the edge of my throat. I almost told her what I shouldn't, that I wanted to stay, that I'd been thinking about her since the moment I walked in. Instead, I just nodded. And the silence that followed felt louder than anything I could have said. I told myself I was only staying for another cup of coffee. 10 minutes, maybe 15. Long enough to be polite, not long enough to mean anything. But meaning has a way of slipping in when you aren't looking. Claire sat across from me, the lamplight soft on her face. She looked less guarded than before, though I couldn't tell if it was the hour or the way she kept pushing her hair back, revealing more of herself than she realized. We talked about nothing and everything, the leaky pipes in the building, how she never bothered to fix the flickering porch light, the neighborhood dogs that barked until morning. Ordinary things, but it didn't feel ordinary. It felt like every word hung between us, heavier than it should have. Then it happened. I reached for the sugar at the same moment she did. Our fingers brushed, not lightly, not just by accident, but firm enough that neither of us moved right away. Her hand stayed under mine warm still. I froze, every nerve in me screaming to pull back, but I didn't. Her eyes flicked up to mine. For a second, it was unbearable, the way the silence deepened, the way my chest tightened. I wanted to say something reckless. "I can't stop thinking about you," or "Tell me I'm not imagining this." Before I could, the sound of her phone shattered it. A shrill vibration on the counter. She jerked back, standing quickly. "Sorry," she murmured, reaching for it. Her voice was tight, rushed. I leaned back, pretending to sip from my mug while my pulse thudded in my ears. I didn't look at her, but I could hear her half of the call. "Yes, I'm fine." "No, I don't need anything. Yes, I'm home." The tone told me enough. Whoever was on the other end, she didn't want them knowing I was here. When she hung up, she lingered by the counter, back half turned to me. I thought she might ask me to leave. She didn't. Instead, she sighed and said quietly, "People always think they know what I need." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because I knew exactly what she meant. Do they? I asked, my voice lower than I meant it to be. She turned, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. Her eyes found mine again, steady, unreadable. Do you? That question sat heavy in the air. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her I hadn't been able to stop watching the way her hand curled around the mug, or the way she looked at the floor when she said something vulnerable. Instead, I said nothing. She crossed the room slowly, her steps quiet on the wood floor. When she stopped near me, her hand brushed my shoulder, deliberate this time. My breath caught. Stay, she whispered. I looked up at her, every reason to leave pounding in my head. But none of them mattered as much as the fact that she was still there, waiting, closer than before. And in that suspended moment, it felt like the line between us was thinner than ever, one word, one move away from being crossed. I don't know when the room stopped feeling like hers and started feeling like ours. The lamp hummed faintly, the coffee had long gone cold, but neither of us moved. She was standing so close now I could see the faint lines at the corner of her eyes, the kind that only appear when you've lived a little too much, or maybe not enough. You shouldn't still be here, she said softly, though she didn't step back. Do you want me to leave? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Her lips parted, then closed. She didn't answer. The silence stretched, sharp enough to cut. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. She was too steady, too composed, even though I could see the pulse flickering at the base of her throat. I pushed back my chair and stood, almost as if distance could make sense of this. This is dangerous, I said. My voice cracked on the last word. Her laugh was short, bitter. Dangerous for who? Me or you? That stopped me cold. I hadn't thought about it like that. I just knew that every second in her orbit pulled me deeper, and I didn't know how to stop. Claire, I started, then hesitated. My hand tightened at my side, nails biting my palm. I can't stop thinking. I cut myself off, shaking my head. Her eyes softened, but only slightly. Don't say it, she whispered. Don't make it real. The ache in her voice undid me. I wanted to reach for her, to close the space between us, to tell her that it was already real whether we spoke it aloud or not. Instead, I stepped closer. Too close. The faint scent of her shampoo, the warmth radiating off her, it was unbearable. I don't want to ruin this, I murmured. Her breath caught. Ruin what? I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry. Whatever this is. Whatever we're pretending it isn't. That cracked something open. Her shoulders dropped, her arms unfolding as if she was too tired to keep the walls up anymore. You think I don't feel it? She said. Her voice was low, almost breaking. Every time you look at me, I feel it. And I hate that I do. Her honesty hit like a punch. She wasn't pretending anymore. And neither was I. For a moment, we just stared at each other, raw and unguarded, the words hanging between us like something alive. I lifted my hand, almost touching her arm, but stopped just shy of her skin. The space between us burned. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then, barely louder than the hum of the lamp, she asked, "What happens if we stop fighting it?" The question lingered in the air, dangerous and impossible, as the silence wrapped around us tighter than any embrace. Her question hung in the air, what happens if we stop fighting it? And I swear I forgot how to breathe. But before I could answer, a sharp knock rattled the front door. Claire flinched. For a heartbeat, she looked terrified, like a secret had just been caught. She pressed a hand to her chest, steadying herself. "Don't move," she whispered, then crossed the room quickly, barefoot steps muffled against the floor. I stayed where I was, my pulse hammering. The knock came again, firmer this time. She opened the door just enough to speak, her voice low but sharp. Yes, now's not a good time. I couldn't hear the other voice, but the tone was familiar, male, casual, maybe curious. My stomach tightened. She slipped out onto the porch, shutting the door behind her. For a moment, I just stood there, listening to the faint murmur of voices through the wood. My hands curled into fists. Whoever it was, she didn't want me hearing. When she came back in, she closed the door quickly and leaned against it, her breath unsteady. Who was that? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Her gaze flicked to the floor, then back to me. My ex, she said finally. He still checks in sometimes. Pretends it's about the house or the papers. The words cut sharper than they should have. Ex-husband. That explained the divorce. Explained the shadows under her eyes. But it didn't explain why my chest suddenly felt tight, like I was intruding on something that wasn't mine to touch. You don't have to explain, I said, though my voice betrayed me. Yes, I do. She pushed off the door, walking back toward me. Her arms wrapped around herself, but her eyes stayed on mine. You should know what you're stepping into. Her honesty left me unsteady. I don't care, I said quickly, too quickly. You should, she cut in. Her voice rose, then softened again. He still has keys. He still thinks this is his place, his life. And if he saw you here… She trailed off, shaking her head. The weight of it hit me. This wasn't just about her and me anymore. It was bigger, messier, more dangerous. Still, when I looked at her, all I saw was the woman standing in front of me, torn between fear and something else she didn't want to name. Claire, I said, my throat dry. Why did you let me stay tonight? If it's this complicated, why didn't you just send me home? She froze, caught off guard. For a moment, her mask slipped entirely. Because… She hesitated, her voice dropping. Because you remind me what it feels like to be wanted again. The confession cracked something wide open. The room seemed to tilt with it, like everything we'd been circling around had just shifted closer. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. All I could do was meet her stare, knowing nothing would ever be the same after what she just said. Her words hung there. You remind me what it feels like to be wanted again, and it was like the air got heavier, charged, impossible to ignore. I wanted to answer, to tell her I'd wanted her since the moment I stepped inside. But for a long second, all I could do was stare, my throat too tight to shape the words. Claire turned away first. She set her mug down on the counter, harder than she meant to. The sound cracked the silence. This is insane, she whispered, gripping the edge of the counter with both hands. You're too young, I'm too, don't. My voice was sharper than I intended. She froze. I stepped closer, not touching her yet, but close enough to feel the warmth of her shoulder through the thin fabric of her shirt. Don't push me away with excuses. Her breath hitched. You don't know what you're asking for. I know exactly what I'm asking for, I said, softer now. My hand hovered, then finally rested against her arm, tentative but steady. She didn't pull back. For the first time all night, she looked at me without any walls. No guarded smile, no sharp retort, just a kind of rawness that made my chest ache. I'm tired of being careful, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Tired of pretending I don't want anything. I swallowed hard. Then don't pretend with me. She turned then, slowly, her face so close I could see the faint tremble in her lips. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat loud enough to drown out thought. It wasn't a grand declaration, or some cinematic rush into each other's arms. It was smaller, quieter. She leaned forward just enough, her forehead brushing mine, and in that fragile space, everything shifted. You could ruin me, she breathed. I closed my eyes, the ache of her words cutting deep. Or I could save you. The pause after was unbearable, like standing on the edge of something with no way back. And then, finally, her hand slid up to my chest, resting there, steadying herself against the storm she'd let in. When her lips touched mine, it wasn't desperate, it was hesitant, careful, like she was still deciding if she had the right. But once she did, either of us pulled away. The kiss was quiet, unhurried, but it carried everything we hadn't said, the sleepless nights, the guarded looks, the questions we'd been afraid to ask. When we finally broke apart, her eyes searched mine, uncertain but alive. "What do we do now?" she asked. The truth was, I didn't know. But I tightened my hand over hers and whispered, "We stop pretending." For the first time that night, she smiled, small, fragile, but real. And in the silence that followed, I knew the decision had already been made. Morning light made everything look different. Softer, less dangerous. The storm that had lived in the corners of Claire's house seemed quieter now, replaced by something steadier. I sat at the kitchen table again, the same place where it all started, only this time the silence between us wasn't sharp. She moved about slowly, making coffee like she'd done it 1,000 times before, but every so often her eyes flicked to me, and neither of us needed to say what had already been decided. She set a mug down in front of me and sat across the table. The same chipped wood, the same worn grooves, but the weight of last night had changed everything. "You know this doesn't make life simpler," she said gently, her fingers brushing the rim of her cup. "I know," I replied. "But it makes it real." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that looked like it had been buried for too long. "I haven't felt real in years." That admission sank into me, heavier than any kiss or touch. She had spent so long hiding, so long convincing herself she didn't need or want anything more. And somehow, I'd become the one who slipped past her guard. I thought about her ex, the knock on the door, the voice outside, the weight she still carried from him. The fear of being seen, of being judged. "You don't have to go through this alone," I said, my voice steady even though my hands curled tight around the mug. Her eyes softened, glistening faintly. "And you don't have to prove anything to me. You already have." We let the silence linger, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence that held space for both of us, a truce, a beginning, maybe both. Finally, she reached across the table. Her hand, small and deliberate, covered mine. Not the hesitant brush from the night before, but something fuller. A choice. "I don't want this to be a secret we regret," she said. "If it stays between us, it's because we choose it, not because we're ashamed." I nodded. She was right. The danger hadn't gone anywhere, the complications were still waiting outside that door. But something had shifted. Shame had turned into longing, longing into something stronger. I squeezed her hand, grounding us both. "Then we don't hide. Not from each other." Her smile deepened, fragile but honest. And in that quiet kitchen, with morning light spilling across the table, it felt like we had stepped into something neither of us could walk away from now. This wasn't about saving or ruining each other anymore. It was about choosing, messy, imperfect, risky, but ours. I lifted my mug, clinked it gently against hers, and said, "To not pretending." Her laugh was soft, but it filled the room in a way I hadn't heard before. And just like that, the story that began with a broken sink ended with something fixed, something neither of us expected, but both of us needed. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?